Okay, fine.
Yep. Yeah. So, like I was saying, I think that the single fundamental problem in the West right now is this critical theory, this deconstruction of what it is to be whoever you are, and just trying to get rid of all of the systems that's worked for so long. I mean, the U.S. Constitution has been a viable system for 240 years. It's done fantastic. It has allowed for all the progress that has happened in the world, and to then just dispense with it because of some notion of perceived um, discrimination or prior
Justice or
happenings.
whatever.
Yeah. And the notion of social justice in general, I think social justice is antithetical to any type of real justice. And when you worry about social justice, you no longer care about what justice is or how it's actuated in the world. And that's my big issue.
Absolutely. I agree with you a lot because as an attorney, I have worried a lot about uh, the the let's say the ordinary justice, the people's justice. Okay. And if you don't have that in place, talking about social justice actually doesn't make much sense. It's just an idea. It's just an ideal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so then you have problem in the United States uh, with crime, and we in Mexico are in the midst, but you guys are also in the midst because criminal justice is negotiated every day, all the time. Okay, it's a negotiation. So then you set up a system where you are not given the fact that you're unable to process everybody according to the book. Then you start making deals. Okay, but then the laws are are have evolved in a way that they don't make any sense. I wrote a paper for one of the cybernetics conferences uh, that we had in the American Society of Cybernetics in Canada several years ago, and I used the example of the Monty Hall problem. You know, the one with the goats in the car and all that, and people cannot just understand why you should change uh, your choice after the first goat is revealed. Actually, you're given free information by the uh, host of the program, but you don't realize that you're giving that advantage. And the same thing happens with the law. The more constraints you establish for raiding a suspected crack house, the worse you're doing for the people that operate the crack houses. So if you're thinking how to protect, let's say, the Mexican American population or the American population or whatever, okay, the poor people that want to try their luck at dealing drugs, when you when you set up all those constraints, supposedly in their benefits, okay, you are actually harming them because you give them an opportunity to run the crack house for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, perhaps a year before you can get a search warrant. Okay. And that is when the law is incapable of calculating probabilities because we are running law under the paradigm of certainty or near certainty. Okay. And all that should be revised according to cybernetics. I won't get into that a lot. Just tell you there's something important to a study here. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah. So I guess the next pressing question. So I mean, I think we agree on that the political system is corrupt. It has a lot of issues, but all of that can be withstood over time. But this political correctness, this critical theory that's being involved in our lives,
Critical
this
race
is
theory. Yeah.
yeah, this will actually collapse the system itself because it's there's no shared identity. There's nothing that we can work together on at all, right? So if there's so much division that there's no identity, no shared belief, no shared system, then
Well,
there's nothing you can do because there's no
maybe
viability.
I'm yes, maybe I am very ignorant about socialism because I really haven't studied that much. Just, but you don't have to go farther than the definition in the dictionary to know that it doesn't work. Okay. So the point here is that if you're trying to run a socialist system, socialists what they do all the time is break up the current system, and then in the midst of the confusion and the chaos, they come up and say, we're going to do it. Now we're going to provide you with socialism. The way they get into power, but then they are unable to rebuild anything looks remotely like a system that provides all sorts of goods and services to millions. Okay.
Hmm.
So I would say don't destroy that which you do not really know that much about. Okay. And I don't have to go to the United States. In Mexico, we had a very ignorant president who's trying to reestablish a government of Mexico like we had in the 50s or in the 60s. Okay. Because according to him, things ran well at that time. It's not true. It ran through electoral fraud, and we had some economic prosperity. And now he's tearing the country apart, okay? And Biden is doing the same by giving money away. You don't have people to fill in the jobs at restaurants. You are in deep trouble, okay? And they don't work because they're getting free money. So money is a sure way to collapse the system, okay?
Yeah,
And something
absolutely.
should be done about it. And we're doing the same thing in Mexico. Lopez Obrador is giving out checks like mad to hundreds of thousands of people, and he calls it, well, that's the minimum wage for people. No, I'm not agree. I don't agree with that. People should get money for something in return, some service, some product, something, not just for free.
Oh, absolutely. And the work that I've done in social stratification, and the big part of like the whole Talcott Parsons and Nicholas Luhmann, and what got me into cybernetics was looking at social stratification as a necessary component for a system. Because when you add complexity into the system for that requisite variety, you necessarily have to have differences of outcomes and because if you have differences of inputs, you're going to have differences of outputs, right? And so when you have 770 million, 365 million people, and they all have inputs that are different, you're necessarily going to have different outputs. And so for you to constantly complain about any type of inequality or any type of social stratification, and then say like the Marxist argument,
Look,
like we can, yeah, go ahead.
my friend, I've thought about this a lot, okay? Because since I spent a lot of time talking to Stafford when he was in Mexico, we met for breakfast. We stayed up late at night. Next day, the same thing, months and months in a row. Uh, I used to question him about the viable system, okay, and it became very clear to me that I was noticing that the viable system was in some way also an idealistic system because he said that the viable system, you would have the same type of people with the same type of knowledge, whether you're the boss or you're the worker. Okay. And that really didn't make any sense to me in practical terms, because in Mexico, at least, you have people that are born and they're kept so ignorant that they have to have a job. You build a job that's repetitive for them because that's all they can do. Okay. And as they study and become better at the jobs, and they can progress and perhaps one day be the managers. Okay. But the point you're making is very simple to say in some other terms. Information and knowledge are not equally distributed in society. Okay. So you're going to get a stratification because it makes a lot of cybernetic sense. Okay. You cannot have a little child who barely knows how to speak in charge of a big company. You cannot have a totally ignorant person as president, as we have right now, without having real trouble. Okay. So differences in information, in knowledge, in wisdom, and in culture in general will explain why society is stratified. Okay. If you want to work in a menial job in some corporation, you want to push a broom all day long, that's all you know how to do, you can start there. But in your free time you can study. I would ask people in your country, okay, you're unsatisfied, you say this is not justice because you're not getting paid enough in your job. Okay, $9 an hour is not enough, or you want 15 or you want 20. Okay, that's not my problem. The problem is, what are you doing, my friend, with your free time? Okay, people that want to progress, you look at what they do with their free time. They don't mind working at a stupid job, making the minimum wage, because they're going to invent the next new mousetrap. Okay, because they're going to develop the next killer software or whatever. Okay, so my question is, you feel this is injustice? Okay, what are you doing with your free time? Going out and rioting? Is that the way you're going to build a system? Burning other people's businesses? People that are perhaps just as poor as you are and trying to make ends meet, and you go burn down their businesses to create this chaos. Okay, to feed society with images of hopelessness for everybody. Is that your way of creating a new society? How about I give you a piece of paper and you sit down and write a constitution that you feel comfortable with, and something that will work. Okay, I'll give you a piece of paper. Now you draft a new constitution. I want to see it, what it looks like. Okay, how are you going to organize everything? How are you going to feed everybody? Okay, so I don't know if this metaphor helps. What are you doing with your free time? How
No,
are you
absolutely.
investing it?
It absolutely helps. And like I said, I grew up very poor and I am where I am now. And a lot of that, I was a high school dropout. I worked full time since I was 16 years old. But during that time, while I was doing that, I was reading constantly. I put myself through school, right? So as I was going to school, I was still working full time a lot. So I'm in a factory. If I'm not working or actively doing something, I'm over there reading from either one of my textbooks or from one of my other, books that I'm reading personally, And again, all of this has allowed me to just consistently build to where I am now. And that's been fundamentally the thing that's helped me out the most. So again, when you talk about what are you
So
doing in your free
you're
time?
living proof of my argument is that you
Absolutely.
can make it even if you start at the poorest of the poor. Okay, that was not my case. But then I have this urge, to help others. If I have all this free time, I could I could I lived, from a war chest that I built and spent years and years chasing electoral fraud all through the country.
Hmm.
And I was doing this on my own. I never asked for anybody money to do this. I wasted like 15 or 20 years of my time doing this, on my own, simply because I could do it. And I sensed that I had to do it because if I had the means, I had the obligation to use that money for something good.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, again, that's to me, that's the most important part of living within a society is trying to make it better. I think it's the one thing that gets left behind in all of the conversations of social justice and stuff like that is just all of the things that I did when I was reading these books and doing all of that, like, yeah, it was to make me better so I could go out and get a job, but it wasn't just to make me better. It was to make my family better. It was to make my community better. It was to make my country better because the goal isn't just for me to be better. It's for the world to be better.
No, because you influence your environment, and then your environment catches you back, influences you back.
Mhm.
So you're changing yourself, changing the environment, and then the environment is changing you again. So you go out and riot and destroy cars and police cars, and you hate policemen. One addition that I did on the viable system in the system that I now call universal management, I don't know if you've noticed, but I added the feature or the function, the systemic function called security. Okay. Security is not part of the viable system, in part because Stafford didn't want to give any ideas to the army, to the military. He was very pacifist. But today, I think if Stafford had considered security like I know he should have, okay, and he knew better, maybe the Cybersyn experiment in Chile wouldn't have gone under because of a military coup. Those guys felt threatened by the cybernetics, and the cybernetics never detected the fact that they were creating this threat, and they never handled that. And maybe they should assure the military that the cybernetics of the economics of Allende was going to be better for everybody. So then the experiment got killed. If you are familiar with the Cybersyn experiment in Chile, and Allende committed suicide, and the teachings of the Cybersyn experiment have not been taken at the world stage at all. Okay, and it's been over 50 years now, and you don't have countries being run by a cybernetic viable system. You have the Constitution, which is a first attempt, but you're not using all the capacities you have to produce better elections, better decisions, a better economy. Okay, you have this enormous potential that is being wasted right now. Okay, and you're being distracted now by communism, by socialist ideas. What's the matter? There's a paper called the Internet. Okay, it talks about the effort of the Soviet Union to install a computerized system to run the economy, and the paper is fine, but the effort they did was laughable. They had Stafford Beer to copy from, and they never could do anything similar, simply because they had such a big bureaucracy, and bureaucracy wouldn't allow any changes. So they had the computers, but the bureaucracy would create more bureaucracy. And if
Mhm.
you're putting the computers on the wrong side of the variety equation, like banks used like to do, like telephone companies like to do, then you as a consumer are totally screwed. Okay. because you cannot figure out what the phone companies are doing with your account, okay? Because it's too complicated, okay? There are too many different plans. You cannot organize to discuss anything. So you get charged something maybe extra, and you can't even tell you're being charged extra, okay? It's so complex.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's another one of those problems in building these complexity systems or working through some of these complex systems is like, how do we and I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, but I like to, because a lot of people know who he is, I like to
Yes.
build this in. So when we have a
Yes,
system,
I watch his videos a lot.
yeah.
Very
So
smart guy.
he's brilliant. And
He would benefit a lot if he learned more cybernetics. He would
well,
be a very great spokesman for cybernetics.
I think so. And I think a lot of what he does talk about does coincide very clearly with cybernetics. I think so. He hangs on to like the Jungian and the psychological literature and stuff like that. Like one of the best ways I think about it is whenever he talks about the chaos and order, right? So order is a system, right? And then the chaos is outside the system. And this is what I've got from both Parsons and Lumen and reading into some of the other cybernetic literature is like whenever we have this system, right? And all of the things that are outside that are trying to influence the system, that's the chaos and the order, and then how that's dealt with. So as that information from the chaos comes in, it's broken down and disseminated throughout the system. And so that's the unknown to the known. And you know, that's his way of thinking, and that's a very systematized
Yeah, yeah,
set.
yes, it is. And you know, there are a lot of businesses, a lot of people that they have learned to think cybernetically through being intelligent and being, as you said, you read a lot. Okay, so there's a lot of companies that do cybernetic planning and thinking without knowing that they're doing some sort of cybernetic management. Okay, but if you read about this stuff, then it becomes much easier because you don't have to spend 30 years to start thinking correctly. You can start from the first 2 weeks, you know, get your brain in order. Okay. So I recommend people read uh, at least part of Introduction to Cybernetics by Ross Ashby. He was Stafford's compadre, good friend of him. And if you look at the VSM, it's in Ross Ashby's ideas about control and the law of requisite variety. The VSM is an application of Ashby's ideas. So Ashby teaches you how to think correctly, okay? And cybernetic thinking is many times counterintuitive, okay? Counterintuitive. Cybernetics, Stafford associated cybernetics a lot with paradox. In complex systems, you get a lot of paradox all the time, okay? And many solutions are paradoxical, okay? So once you learn to embrace paradox, you can deal with anything, okay? You can deal with anything.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes I've ever heard. It's from Walt Whitman. I don't even know the show, but he says, and somebody goes, "Well, you're a contradiction," and he goes, "Of course I'm a contradiction. I am vast. I am large. I must contradict." Um, so, and I mean, if you take a human and you put them in 20 different situations, you're probably going to get 20 different outcomes because everything is a contradiction, everything is a paradox. So it makes sense that everything from a
Be-
cybernetic state would be
because
that.
we have been taught at an early age about the laws of physics and chemistry and all that, cause and effect, okay? But once you start dealing with circular causality, then it gets interesting. Then you can talk about paradox and how things, arguments seem to be circular, okay? It's what I told you about the requisite variety. Variety absorbs variety. Okay, but it's perturbance variety being absorbed by control variety. Okay, so it's not that simple. Okay, so let's say, what is the variety of a 2-year-old? Well, he can be sleeping, eating, playing, or getting into trouble. Okay, so how are you going to counteract the getting into trouble part? Okay, so you build a little coop, you little corral or something, to prevent him from getting into trouble, or you hug him when you're going to cross the street. You
Yeah.
constrain him, okay, so that he doesn't get out of control. So
Yeah, absolutely.
cybernetics is really very interesting for anybody that has intellectual um, hunger, hunger to learn things. It's a vast field. My colleague talked about the apple of knowledge, and I call it the biggest bite of the apple of knowledge. Cybernetics. Okay, it's everywhere. Like this guy from MIT told me, it's cybernetics is like air. It's everywhere. Pentland. His name is Pentland. Uh, so right now, I'm very concerned of this social movement, socialistic movements in the United States and in Mexico, and when they are very a lot of the ideas from socialists come from cybernetic thinking, systematic thinking in a way, but they just take the surface and they scratch the surface, but they don't go deep. Okay. One of the first ecological minds was part of the Macy Foundations in 46 to 52. Okay. The first sociologist looking at systems, the first psychologist looking at systems, the first computers looking at systems, the first software programming, uh, even mathematics and philosophy were influenced by the Macy Foundation meetings. Okay, and if you look at a map of the sciences, some of them don't even have cybernetics in there. You look at the history of science, some books don't even mention cybernetics. I don't know what they're thinking, but maybe it wasn't born as a science per se. It was born like an area of knowledge having to do with control and communications. But people should start uh, looking at cybernetics more closely, because to get out of the mess we're in, we're going to need a lot of cybernetic thinking. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm going to let you go. The last thing I want to kind of say is, first of all, some of the most important minds in all of history have been cyberneticians. Most famously, Dr. John von Neumann. I
Oh,
think
he's my hero. He's
he
absolutely
is,
the brightest guy ever. Okay.
like, without a doubt, people talk about the brilliance of Einstein. I think it was nothing in comparison, and I mean this with all the love in the world for Einstein, but it was nothing in comparison to Newman's work in quantum mechanics, in economics, in psychology, in
Absolutely.
computer information
Absolutely.
systems. It's mind blowing the amount of work that he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Then
Absolutely. He's number one.
and then, like I said, some of the people that I have looked up to for years, such as Talcott Parsons and all of these other individuals who've applied this cybernetical thinking. And I think it's really important, and I want to thank you a lot for this. I do have to get back to doing what I'm doing. I'm going to
Okay.
stay in touch, and
Anytime you want, we can have another conversation.
Absolutely. And I actually want
Make
to
your
next.
list of questions. I'm open. I like your enthusiasm for this, and it's not that because you coincide with me, but because you can see the United States from another angle, and if I can help, I want to help. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop recording.